Set. Ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone. So today we'll be presenting our research, which has been accepted to the International Journal of Methods and Educational Research. This peer-reviewed journal publication is titled Art as Motor Medium, a Pedagogical Approach to Teaching and Learning About Self-Reflexivity in Qualitative Research. We are graduate students from Cal State Northridge. My name is Patricia Lara, and my colleagues are
Alexei Reshetnikov.
And I'm Elizabeth Bogman. So a brief overview of our presentation. First, we're going to discuss the power of art in research, and then we'll touch on arts-based approaches to research, segueing into reflexivity using the arts, and then the assignment that was related to the class that we took that ended up having this paper come out of it. Patty will talk about visual arts and cartooning. Alexi will talk about documentary film, and I will talk about new media and blogging. And then we'll have 3 takeaway points.
Now, unfortunately, arts-based research has really been neglected by the social sciences. We decided we wanted to really incorporate this, and so we think it's important because it allows the researcher to do a number of things. First, it lets them better locate themselves within the research process. It also lets the researchers share the process with the participants, and you can share the power structure between the participant and the researcher. Creative means also provide universal experiences for the observers, while as academics, we typically only write in journals or deal with other academics. So it lets us reach a wider range of people.
According to Finley, there are 4 distinctive features that set arts-based research apart from other forms of qualitative inquiry. The first is that it makes use of our emotive and affective experiences as ways of knowing and responding to the world. The second is that it gives researchers interpretive license to create meaning from experience. The third is that it enhances understanding of a social condition through multiple representational forms. And the fourth is that art within research can be a representation, a process, and a form of inquiry. In order to be considered legitimate art, you must have a commitment to a particular art form, which reflects in the creative research process and represents research texts. There must also be a rationale for use of particular art mediums that fosters critical consciousness and empowerment.
So when considering reflexivity in the art, it's impossible while doing research to remain outside or disconnected from one subject matter. Reflexivity urges us to explore the ways in which the researcher's involvement with a particular study influences, acts upon, and informs research. So critical reflexivity is the process whereby one enters into high-quality awareness of one's own psychological, philosophical, and emotional ideas before, during, and after the research experience for the purpose of understanding the personal and psychological state of others. So you can engage with the reflexive process through using arts as a method of understanding, and by engaging in this artistic synthesis of research, the researcher can gain greater understanding of the phenomena being studied.
So at this point, we just talked about art as a research method, and you're probably wondering what we did with it. So this is what we did. We were all members in a graduate qualitative research methods class taught by Dr. Kappas Basilis at CSU Northridge. Unfortunately, she could not make the journey with us today, but she's wishing us lots of love via email, asking about Tozy songs. So the assignment essentially was, we were asked to conduct qualitative research on a topic that we were interested in while incorporating artistic methods to increase self-reflexivity within the research process. The creative expression would then be shared with the instructor and the peers within the class. We'd evaluate the benefits and the drawbacks of using our respective artistic methods. Now, so you're probably wondering what these methods were. First, I did a documentary video diary series. I think it's a little bit important to tell you about my research, what my actual research was. I focused on an online self-harm group, so people can hurt themselves, cut themselves, anything to physically injure themselves on purpose. This community was very vulnerable, so because of that, I really wanted to focus on the ethical issues that I faced when interviewing these people online. I conducted 15 interviews with members of this group, 8 interviews and 10 text posts were analyzed and coded for themes, and I examined how this group functioned, particularly focusing on interactions and common themes within the group experience. Now, because of the vulnerable nature of them, I decided I would sit in front of a camera and explore the issues within the research process through a video diary series. That's me, video diary series, including the beer and the graduate student desk in the stills. So these video diaries were filmed roughly every month throughout the research process. Each video was 15 minutes or so in length. There was no structure to the videos themselves. Whatever I wanted to say, that's what I said, and that's what I watched back. The first thing I became aware of through the video diary was just how worrisome the ethics of this project were for me. While I was aware that there were issues, I wasn't really sure how many safety concerns I would have until I got to watch myself go through these worries about this vulnerable group through the video back. So it helped me add an extra layer of protection for my participants before I even began the research. Secondly, discussing the themes on camera later on in the research allowed me to collect my thoughts about the commonalities among these participants that were emerging, and it made the final coding process substantially easier for me. And finally, the final video diary I made it clear I was developing too close a relationship with some of my participants. A few of them I've maintained contact with for about a year after the research was done because we had developed this bond that I didn't feel comfortable getting rid of. So it showed that there was a drastic shift from my initial total outsider perspective to more of an insider using the same lingo, using the same commonalities that they've had. So the final video I compiled together, it was around 13 minutes long. It let me watch the entire research process, which is something you don't really get to do as an academic, is watch through your entire research process from start to finish and see where you are in each step. So this ability to look back through the research process at any time is a resource that I think any academic researcher should have access to.
My research was on domestic violence, specifically male victims of intimate heterosexual relationships. I was drawn to this particular subject when I volunteered for the Domestic Abuse Self-Help Center, and I interacted with multiple, what we described as litigants, but essentially individuals who were seeking restraining orders. I wanted to draw attention to the discrimination males who claim to be abused in an intimate relationship face, and by doing so, I wanted to emphasize that abuse comes in multiple forms other than physical, and also that male victim is so contradictory to society's ideals of masculinity that's difficult for the public to envision male as a victim. My data was collected through various online forums. There were a total of 25 participants in the study, and the visual art piece was created using pencils, pastels, and supplementary accessories to ensure that the smudging wouldn't occur. From the data acquired and categorized through online blogs, I constructed images that illustrated the forms of abuse the men in my study alluded to in their blogs. Since my data was collected through blogs, the illustration allowed me to have a clear visualization of what males experience in these abusive relationships. So representing a human experience, specifically one that has been rendered invisible to the general public, can be an arduous task to achieve slowly through academic verbiage and figures. Visual art has the capacity to convey notions that touch the audience and leaves a transformative impact not only for the audience, but I myself felt that I had a clear understanding of my own research through the visual art piece.
And so my mode of research and also my medium for representing my artistic project was blogging. My interest was in Mormon mommy bloggers. So the title of the research was For Time and Eternity, Mormon Mommy Bloggers and the Creation of Family History Through Storytelling. I was intrigued by the components of Mormon culture, particularly their focus on the family, journal writing, and the desire to create, convey, and maintain a really strong family history. So Mormons, context, believe that their families will stay together in heaven. So they believe that eternal families. So passing down family history from one generation to another to link them together is really important in their culture. And the inspiration and kind of the research question I was looking at was to uncover cultural themes belonging to the Mormon mommy bloggers in two blogs, Life in the Desert and Life in the City, and to describe the importance and the experience of creating family history, myth, and legend through blogging. So to highlight my reflexive process and my arts-based research, I used blogs as a mode of data collection. So I collected the data that I was analyzing through blogs, but I also used it as a method for representing my own reflexive process. I updated my blog fairly regularly over the course of the research, and I used, and the goal was to understand the process of documenting day-to-day life within my life, and then also how it kind of related to what was going on with the related blogs. The subjects and themes of my blog entries did not relate to the research that I was doing, so I wasn't blogging about the research. I was blogging about similar topics that I was finding in the more common blogs. So if they were talking about family or if they were talking about holidays, I would try to parallel similar topics to uncover the challenges behind blogging. The results were really interesting. First of all, it helped me reflect on the process of blogging, so the actual process of it and how to negotiate it. Second, I discovered blogging is quite involved and time-consuming. Just a few details on that. So there is a lot of time needed for blogging. You have to have the process of creating a story and thinking about the story, so you're always thinking about it, and then actually writing it down and making sure it's worthy for a blog entry. Because you can just document your everyday life like in a journal, but other people are reading this blog, so you're broadcasting it to a large group of people, and you want to make sure it has some quality. I concluded that those who engage in family storytelling were also engaging in work and creative art. And finally, that creating engaging storytelling done with style, whether based in eternal family histories or the mundane, like I was blogging about, is a form of art in itself.
So if there are three things we want you to take away from this presentation, we've labeled them takeaway points. The first one, arts-based research as a medium encourages the researcher's reflexive process through creative means.
The second is that it brought our inner thoughts, feelings, and perceptions to the forefront of our consciousness.
And finally, it encourages the creation of a final artistic product for which the researcher can use to share the research findings with the greater group. So if you guys are interested in contacting us, because not all of our information is listed in the schedule, you're welcome to take down our emails. And then if you're interested in contacting the professor that we did this project with in the class it was affiliated with, this is Dr. Pipos de Sosa's information. Okay, so we're done. Do we have a volunteer to go next? Okay. Oh, we're actually going to do questions at the end, and that way we all have a little bit of equal time to do that.
Good morning, guys. My name is Brooke. I'm from Cal State University, Bakersfield. I, in the past couple of years, really got interested in the reproduction inequality within the educational system. So first I looked at single moms, and then it kind of led me to first-generation college students, and this is kind of where I ended up. So background, so before we talk about first-generation college students, I should really define what first-generation college student is. A first-generation college student is someone whose parents has not been to college at all. So even if their parent went to college for a semester, they are no longer a first-generation college student. This allows me to study them quantitatively. If we made all these parameters well aware, if they only went to college for a semester, then still first, it would create a lot of complications in data. So most research use that definition. First-generation college students are a large group on most campuses. They make about a third of the population, and they're still growing. Retention and graduation rates of first-generation college students fall below graduation rates of non-first-generation students. So what this means is first-generation college students who enroll in college are less likely to make it up to sophomore, junior, senior level, and they're definitely less likely to actually graduate and earn a college degree. So why does this matter? Well, first of all, college affects real-world success. So as most people know, if you have a college degree, you're more likely to have a higher annual income. So it follows that those who don't graduate college aren't going to make as much income as those who do. So for a first-generation college student, because a lot of them come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, college is really their opportunity to lift them up out of that and create a better life for them. But if they're having issues with the college process, if they're having issues with school or dropping out, they don't reach those goals. Minorities are also overrepresented in first-generation college student populations. which creates another factor in studying them. There have been some great studies about perceived minority status and how that also affects graduation retention rates. So when we're talking about first-generation college students, we need to be cognizant of their minority status as well. So currently, studies on first-generation college students vary widely. I mean, this is still a highly studied subject. So you'll see everything from psychological studies on stress and coping mechanisms. You'll see things about their background, their minority status, their socioeconomic status. You'll see things about poverty. A lot of things I ran into were about Hispanics and test scores and how they fare compared to whites. And then counseling services. How do counselors in high school encourage first-generation students to go on, and how do they give them the tools to be successful? But there's a gap. There aren't a whole lot of quantitative studies that look at first-generation college students in regards to social and cultural capital and compare them to non-first-generation college students. A lot of studies that I ran into that focused on social and cultural capital were after the fact. So interviews with people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, which is not representative of the current students. So that led me to the question, how does social and cultural capital affect academic success and degree completion of first-generation undergraduate students at California State University, Bakersfield? So I'm using my own institution to research, one, out of convenience. Two, we are a Hispanic-serving institution. That means we have a large population of Hispanic students. And we have a very large population of first-generation college students. So it's a really great campus to get a feel of what's going on with first-generation college students. So I've largely based my study on Pierre Bourdieu. Some of you may be familiar with him. If not, that's totally fine. He focused a lot on the reproduction inequality and the reproduction inequality in institutions and institutions like education. So he discussed the terms of human capital, and within that are social and cultural capital, which can be acquired as kind of like economic capital. It's not something that you're literally given, but you inherit it from your parents and you use it to gain something in society. So cultural capital are social assets. They promote social mobility such as education, style, speech, intellect. So in the classroom, cultural capital is like how a student would ask questions, how a student's been told to interact with other students, to reach out for help. We've noticed in Hispanic males, they're less likely to reach out for help and ask questions. So that would be kind of forms of cultural capital. And social capital, you can think of it kind of like networking. So social capital enables students to use things like cultural capital and other forms of capital to get resources and support. So social capital really helps them to make connections and to further their progress in education. And so if people are lacking social and cultural capital, students are lacking these things, they're ill-equipped to navigate the college system. As most college students know, application processes can be really frustrating. Getting through classes can be frustrating. How to utilize office hours, how to interact with your classmates. So if you don't already know these things before you get into college, you're going to have to figure them out on your own. So my method of design, I am currently in the process of doing a quantitative study of first-generation college students. So about halfway through my data collection. Data collection should finish mid-January, I'm hoping. So students are being surveyed from various classes that fulfill general education requirements. Obviously, it'd be easier to just go straight to my social professors and get their social students, but that's not what I want. I want a sample that is kind of evenly dispersed across disciplines and across levels. So some of the classes are like upper-level biology classes that are technically what we call a theme class. Not all students are kind of required to take a science class. Lower division sociology, lower division religious studies, lower division history classes. To kind of get that nice evenness version. The surveys are made available online, so I'm using a site called Qualtrics. And it gives me a link to send out to students. So one of the ways that we're giving them students is this site called Blackboard. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Blackboard is something that the instructors use to facilitate learning in an online format. So a lot of times they'll put on their coursework, they'll put on assignments. Some classes are done strictly on Blackboard as online classes. So professors upload this link. Students are able to click on this link. Professors don't know if they've clicked on it or not, so it's completely voluntary. Or some professors will set up their email, because not all professors use Blackboard. So it's another way that we're reaching students. So So in measuring my variables, so first generation status is determined by their maternal or paternal parents' education levels and or depending if they come from a single parent household or not. Social capital, I'm using a Likert scale. So, strongly disagree to strongly agree in measuring those forms. And I'll show you like 2 slides that kind of show these variables to give you more of an idea. Control variables are age, race, ethnicity, and income. So this is how I'm measuring first generation. So it asked about maternal parents, and I put in parentheses biological, adoptive, legal guardian, because I don't want students to think that it's only their biological mother. Because some students may have a biological mother, but never actually lived with her or spent time in the house with her. Therefore, if they only measure her, that's not really going to be indicative of their experience. And the same slide goes for paternal. And then there's a bunch of options because I want to see if as the levels get higher, like if you have 2 PhD parents who have PhDs, if you're more likely to have greater amounts of social capital. And then this is kind of how I'm measuring some forms of social capital. It's questions like, do you agree that your parents supported you in high school? Do you agree that your parents participated in college planning? Do you feel comfortable contacting faculty members for help? Do you have close friends at the university? Things like that. So I have had some time to do some preliminary demographic information. And so far, when I did the data, the survey was about 140. It's about 150 now. I'm hoping to get around 300. Interestingly, same exact number of Hispanic and whites have taken the survey, which is kind of no surprise considering we're a Hispanic serving institution. 7.7% African American, and then the other is a mix. There's literally an other box that people can write things in, and sometimes it's something legitimate, and sometimes it's something that's not legitimate. The median age is 21. No surprise there for college students. 72% of the students on my campus are employed, which again is really not unusual. We're what we call a blue-collar campus. So we're a lot of working class, so a lot of the students work. And median family income is $45,000 to $55,000 annually. So preliminary findings were kind of interesting. There is a significant relationship between first-generation students and class standing. So what that means is the data is pretty evenly dispersed between freshmen and seniors. So what I'm seeing so far is that underclassmen, freshmen, and sophomores tend to have quite a bit of first-generation students, whereas upperclassmen, juniors, and seniors don't. So this says something about retention rates that I talked about earlier, is what is happening to these students? Why aren't there more students in junior and senior classes? And then there's a strong, significant relationship between mom's education and social capital. So how I did social capital is I made several different variables for it, and I combined them all into one big one to measure the large social capital, so comprehensive social capital, and then I can compare the levels of it. So for someone whose mom has not gone to college, it affects everything. It affects all aspects of social capital, which is really interesting to me. And I'm not sure why that is. I would love to find that out. But my guess is going to be because Bakersfield is in a very conservative community, that they have very much that kind of old-fashioned traditional family thing. So mom is often very involved with the kids, whereas dad goes to work and does those sorts of things. So I'm thinking that even if dad's educated, dad may not be as involved in the student's college process. There's a weak relationship so far between first generation and comprehensive social capital, so there's kind of not a whole lot there. However, there's a significant relationship between first generation students and parental support. So if they feel like they can go to their parents during tough times during college, and in the college planning process. So first generation students are less likely to have their parents help them with applications and things like that. So limitations of this study. The study only looks at one campus. That's a big limitation. Cal State Bakersfield is not representative of every campus in California, let alone every campus in the United States. So in furthering the study, which I hope to do in my graduate studies, I would really like to get schools from various universities across the country, ideally definitely across California. So it can't be generalized. So whatever I find, I can't say, oh, well, the same's going to be at UCLA or the same's going to be at Sac State, because they're all different. And the study is only a snapshot, so it can only tell me what's going on in my own community, my own university now. So what would be nice to do eventually is a longitudinal study, And then that way I can find out why are there first generation students in freshman and sophomore, but not junior and senior years. What is happening? Are they dropping out? Are they getting kicked out? Why? What's going on there? And so I would really love to eventually do a qualitative component where I can interview maybe once or twice a year a group, a sample from the group that has responded, and kind of figure out these in-depth questions of what's going on with these students. And that's it.
Do we have our next presentation?
I do have some quotes up here further on, so it might be kind of difficult to see, just FYI. Okay, so my name is Mayra Villarreal, recent graduate in sociology master's program at San State. So this is going to be my thesis. Did work on second generation Chicanas in higher education and their experiences with gender and racial microaggressions. So just before going to the questions, just a little bit of background. I identify second generation Chicanas, and how I define that was folks that come from at least have one parent of Mexican descent, that their families to go to college, and I identify as such. So this comes from a very personal place. And I wanted to further explore the experiences of these individuals and populations within the university setting. The research questions, what microaggressions, if any, do second generation Chicanas experience? What actions do they take when they have experienced these aggressions? What messages do these carry? And how do they cope with the aggressions? And how do they see themselves within this larger context? A little bit about the importance, as I see it, of the study. It's important to see how Chicanas are supported or not supported within the university setting. And it's important to consider, as California holds a lot of institutions that are not Hispanic serving institutions. So it's very important to see what are the dynamics within the institutions as to how we serve this population. How I'm wanting to add to literature on microaggressions. Microaggressions has a lot of focus on looking into the experiences of African Americans, particularly males, but there is definitely not a lot to speak of when it comes to Latinas, when it comes to individuals from the second generation backgrounds. I really wanted to add to this. And finally, just to provide a richer picture of some lived experiences of this population. Some of the literature on microaggressions, this was first coined by Chester Pierce in the late 70s, and he did his work on how African American males are perceived within the media, and he saw that microaggressions are really the chief vehicle for pro-racist behavior, and he described them as subtle, stunning, often automatic, nonverbal exchanges which are put down by offenders. Later on, taxonomy was developed by Dr. Gerald Winstew and his colleagues. It was broken down into 4 categories. First was environmental microaggressions, and these are macro-level aggressions that are produced through symbols and inaccurate representations within television, music, film, and institutions such as government, education system, and so on. And these can be range in all sorts. So these are far more internalized, institutionalized microaggressions. Next is microassaults, and these are oftentimes intentional, direct or verbal or nonverbal attacks, and these can come in the form of telling jokes about somebody's racial or ethnic background, gender, abilities, sexual orientation, and whatnot. And then some micro insults. These are insensitive put-downs that attack an individual's heritage or really any community that they're part of that is marginalized. Micro insults are actually more often than not unconscious, so they're acts that aren't necessarily aware by the aggressor. And finally, micro invalidations. These are also far more unconscious, and these are remarks that diminish or negate the realities and lived experiences of individuals from marginalized communities. And these could be anything from being seen as an alien in your own land. So even though you may have been born in the country, being seen that you're undocumented. The myth of meritocracy is one of them. And finally, denial of personal racism, sexism, and so on. And just to finish with microaggressions, these are very, very difficult to track because they are so subtle. More often than not, folks that experience these don't realize that they have experienced these aggressions because they're not overt. They oftentimes go unnoticed, as I mentioned. They're brushed off as inconsequential. Folks feel that if they say something about their experience, that they might be seen as too sensitive, or that they're just thinking too much into it. So it can be very difficult for individuals that have been aggressed to process these emotions. So I utilized 3 different frameworks for my work: intersectionality, multiracial feminism, and symbolic interaction. Intersectionality and multiracial feminism is a far more macro level look into the experiences of this population, and symbolic interaction is much more micro level. So within intersectionality, it really provides an opportunity to understand that we live within different systems of oppression, particularly for this population is gender and race. And it really provides an opportunity for us to have a greater understanding of systems of inequality and how they are seen within the different parts of ourselves. Multiracial feminism provides further insight into the power dynamics between individual and social structure. It also gives us a better look as to how gender facilitates a lot of that inequality. And symbolic interaction provides us an opportunity to see how it is that ideologies that are found within large society are reproduced at an interpersonal level. Because oftentimes how we interact really dictates how we often see the world. So I really wanted to look at how it is that women, this population typically saw the interactions that they were part of, how it is that they interpreted these interactions. I conducted 16 open-ended interviews. The participants ranged from first-year freshmen to graduate students, and they also range in the academic plans that they were a part of. And they were 4 of the 7 colleges in the university. Came from 2 in engineering, 5 in health and human services, 5 in social sciences, and 4 in the arts and letters. Out of the 16, 14 were from Northern California. 1 was from the Central Coast, and the final one was from Southern California. Those that were from Northern California were oftentimes from small towns, agricultural, whose populations were generally divided between white and Latino. The results, there were a handful of different microaggressions that really came out in the themes. First was environmental, and for the participants, this really came in the form of lack of representation in the faculty, lack of representation within the student body, and lack of connection with the curriculum to their own lived experiences. And this really affected them because they saw themselves a bit isolated. So 2 participants, one said that Latino faculty are getting pushed out, we are losing them, and they are not getting replaced. Another student mentioned, instructors trivialize our experiences when they choose not to touch on these subjects. I feel like it pushes you to be ashamed of who you are. In terms of micro insults, folks really mentioned that they were, there was the assumption of traditional gender roles, so they were seen as being expected to stay within the home, to really care for their family, and not being seen as achieving, or the ability to achieve their college degree. There was also the assumption of intellectual inferiority, that because they were female, because they were persons of color, that they, again, were not able to engage in rigorous academic activity. So one student mentioned, a lot of professors, they can't tell by my last name that I'm Chicana. When they do realize that I'm Chicana, they oftentimes downplay my intelligence. Often they are surprised at how well I write or how proficient in English I am. The last type of microaggression that was experienced was micro-invalidations, and these came in 2 forms. One was exclusion, and that really was their students' identities were really questioned more often than not, and this really came as a result of their appearance. If they were not seen as the prototypical Mexican or Chicana, then their identities were questioned. A few of the students were lighter in complexion, and that was really an issue for a lot of individuals because they were not dark-skinned, and then they were not seen as Mexican. They were also, another thing was that there was a sense that all Chicanas were the same by their peers. So one student to that said, I always get called upon to speak on behalf of my community, like I'm supposed to know everything about all Mexicans. And in anthropology class, they were talking about Dia de los Muertos, and I got picked on to talk about that. So there's this expectation that if you have a surname that quote unquote sounds Latino Mexican, then therefore you are expected to know everything there is to know about this community. And of course, it's not evident by this fact, so you can't really speak on behalf of everybody just because you have a name that sounds, quote unquote, sounds. Some of the reactions that they had, folks either confronted an aggressor or they ignored the situation. In terms of those that confronted aggressors, they spoke of wanting this to be an opportunity to educate individuals, to debunk stereotypes, to really ensure that this behavior doesn't occur. So one student, in speaking about her interaction with a faculty member, she said, I just thought he was feeding into and creating those stereotypes about our men of color. And I did talk to him, and I really feel it made a huge difference about how he teaches his classes. So this student had the opportunity and felt comfortable enough to talk with the faculty member, and as a result of the conversation, there was a shift in paradigm. Those that ignored the situation felt that they did not want to feed into the aggression. They felt that if they spoke about it, then that would really aggravate it further, it would blow up in their faces, so they just didn't want anything to do with that. They felt that their energy could be better spent elsewhere. One student said, generally I don't say anything because I don't want to pay attention to them. Like maybe they want to get your reaction or something, and I'm not going to give them that satisfaction. Some of the effects of these microaggressions, first there was a sense of isolation. As I mentioned before, the result of many of the environmental microaggressions, they felt alone on campus. And something interesting about that, considering the population of Latinos in California and generally, but particularly within the CSU system, the UC system, so to feel isolated when campuses have large populations of Latinos is very interesting. One student said, it's one thing to relate to a woman, but I never see Mexican women. I mean, I think my whole 4 years here, I had maybe 5 women teachers, maybe 6. Everyone else was a dude and they were white. I feel like to see somebody that you can relate to a bit more, you can be like, yes, I can get there someday. So effectively they were role models for them and really provided them the opportunity to grow and really achieve more. However, these microaggressions also provided them an opportunity and really the strength to keep moving forward. They utilize these as fuel to essentially kind of show people that they are capable of this. One student said, "I'm proud to say that I'm a woman of color and people can say what they want, but I'm going to keep fighting. I owe it to the coming generations to fight and allow them to have the opportunities that I did not have, and allow them to choose and to identify however they want without being told otherwise." And finally, just how they coped with these aggressions. First and foremost, they established strong networks. This was with their friends, with their faculty, staff, being part of organizations on campus. One student said that I talked to my